Welcome to the Perspective Knoll, a channel that creates audiobooks from original stories and including some fan fiction short stories in between. If this is something you're into, then feel free to like and subscribe so that you don't miss any of our new content.
Chapter 20 Hospitality or Prisoner. Charles had awoken on the fourth day after being told to wait for a response from the guards at the south gate. He was exhausted and hungry, and above all else, he smelt like one bad case of body odor. Laurie was irritated the most, and every 4 hours, she had walked over to the gates and demanded to speak with someone. She pleaded for any type of explanation as to why it was taking so long to get back to them. Anthony felt that this was the way of things in the Western Kingdom and that, no doubt, war was slowing everything down. Harmen was mostly enjoying the open outdoors and often hunted for fish in the thin river that ran next to their campsite. "Do you think this is their way of letting us know that they are refusing our request?" Laurie asked anyone who would care to give an answer. Anthony was sitting on a log that Harmen had dragged over on their first night. "Laurie, it's war, and we are just travelers. We aren't high up enough on their priorities. Although you might have a point. The guards have checked on us, maybe twice in the past 4 days now. Maybe the next time they come over they might kick us out of our sight here for loitering. I don't know what feels right anymore." Charles was pacing around their makeshift campfire, and for the first time in days, his face was feeling better. He stopped, and while staring at the ground he asked, "Okay, if not the Western Kingdom, is there anyone else who could help us? Or any place besides here that may have people who are willing to help?" Anthony rubbed his neck before he answered. "My folks knew much more about this place than I ever did. I know little outside of where my parents' house resides in the forest, and I have only been as far as the front of the castle. I wouldn't consider that enough to be familiar with anything in between." Laurie then asked another question for Anthony. "You said your powers are similar to the Hulk's, right? Couldn't you just get us in there by jumping over the wall or breaking through it?" "We'd be killed shortly after," Anthony replied with a weak smile. "Since I don't feel like dying today or any time in the near future, I'm going to see how Harmen's coming with the food. We've wasted too much time here." "Laurie, I'm sorry." Charles wasn't hiding his frustrations anymore. "I had no idea how much of a chance this path was. Had I known that the men of the Western Kingdom would be less than helpful, we would have gone a different route. Hell, maybe we should pack up now and see if we can't talk Valinar into helping us." "You should be sorry." Laurie's tone was sarcastic, but there was no doubt truth to her words. Charles, however, didn't notice the sarcasm in her voice. "Look, being a detective is great, and had I known this is where that call would have taken Shawn and I, then I would have never offered him to tag along. I might not have taken the job myself." Laurie had walked up to him. "Charles, you can't keep letting this dig at you. Think of it this way, we're on another planet in another dimension, or however you want to interpret this. Who else can say that's even possible back on Earth? We will get Shawn back." Charles turned and walked a few steps away from her. "You know, that's exactly what your husband had told me. I was having an anxiety attack over the realization of this place back on our first day here. But no matter how you put it, Laurie, he's missing in this world because of me." Laurie patted Charles on the back and then sat down on the log and stared at the cold fire pit. "It doesn't matter who is to blame. Pointing fingers will not change what has already been done. Let's focus on the one thing we can do, and that is getting him back. So, enjoy the ride for now. This will be the story to top the rest of them when we get back home. Your friends will have no way of topping this story, I promise you." "Excuse me, are you the party that needed access into the kingdom?" asked a voice that had come from the direction of the road, and it was a man on a horse. He seemed like a very well-decorated soldier, and his armor resembled a possible knight, with shining plated steel. "Who are you?" asked Charles. The man dismounted from his dark brown horse and removed his helm. "My name is Brennan Dole, I am the captain of the wall. I patrol and make sure all corners of the wall are kept up to my king's and queen's liking. Does anyone in your company go by the name of Laurie?" That's me, Laurie answered, and she stood up from her seat and made her way over to Brennan. Are you going to let us in? I have a question to ask you first. Brennan had gave everyone a once-over before he continued. Are you not in the possession of a Leo Mandarin painting? Laurie paused for only a moment but then nodded her head. Just then, Harmon had returned from the river with a few good-sized fish in his mouth. Is this bear a part of your party as well? Asked Brennan as he surprisingly stood his ground and never made a move to grab his sword when Harmon had walked up. Harmon merely stared at the man for a few seconds and then his eyes got large and he dropped the fish. Captain Brennan. It's great to see you again. It's me, Harmon, said Harmon excitedly. This man saved my life when I was a cub. Harmon. The cub? That is you. Honestly, it was just another day for me, helping out stray animals and all. Replied a modest Brennan as he folded his arms, and his mood had changed considerably and seemed much less formal. Ages ago it seems, Harmon had wandered away from his den and apparently slipped off a ledge as he was exploring the mountainside of Hiatus. Poor little guy broke a leg and was lying there squealing in pain for some time before I was able to get to him. I thank you once more, Captain. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. Harmon approached Brennan and the captain hugged the great big bear like the old friends that they were. Brennan scratched the side of his face. Well, had I arrived back at the castle to receive my order sooner, then you wouldn't have been out here for days. I do apologize for the long wait. Well, let's get you people inside the wall. Don't forget the painting, please. Charles and Anthony strapped the painting to Harmon's back. It didn't bother Harmon at all this time, and in fact he seemed happy to have it strapped to him once more. Brennan mounted his horse and kept in step with the group as they made their way to the gates. As they approached them, one side had opened its massive door and awaiting them was a thick part of the forest, seeming like another wall in itself. It wasn't long that they had made it through the layer of trees and were looking out at an open plain. On either side of them were rows and rows of crops, and men and women could be seen tending to the fields. Some gave a friendly wave as the party passed, and even a "good morning" from an old man who was resting on a fence post having a smoke from his pipe. The road was straight, and up ahead there was another wall, but much shorter and less threatening than the previous one. Rising from within the wall was a city seeming like no other that Charles nor Laurie had ever seen before. There were structures that shot upwards like a spire of white and crowned with golden tops. Others were flat and wide with stony trimmed openings facing outward in the shape of a cross. I've seen many types of similarities in this place compared to our world. Charles leaned in and quietly spoke to Laurie. The accent from Jordan's post-town manager, Thaddeus. It was like he came from Kentucky. Swear to God. Then there was a grave where Harmon and I found the ghost of Dale Shepherd, and one read, E. Presley. I can't help but think, since the paintings are a portal into our world, that hell, maybe this is where Elvis came to die. I don't know, Charles, it all seems like a dream. Every bit of it. I mean, look at Harmon. A talking bear that is larger than any other bear on earth. Laurie then breathed in deep and exhaled. That air alone is something that is fresh and a bit stale, like a diet soda. Charles was suddenly confused by her explanation. What's your point? Well, with the air, I guess I don't have a point, but everything else. Your powers, in which you didn't have before you got here, and funny how it's an ability that is used for detectives. I think that's one hell of a coincidence. I'm still waiting to see what my powers are. Maybe I can communicate with animals? Charles laughed. Seems to be lucky that I got these powers. From what I've been told, there haven't been any lawmen for some time. It's like that ability is not in the rotation here anymore. Charles scratched his lip and thought. Maybe something has taken it out for a reason. I don't know if we can trust this soldier here, but I have questions for the king and queen. What about the fairy Argatha? You said she killed Ed Spencer and that you saw it happen. Where do you think she is now? Laurie asked. That is the final piece of the puzzle, and if we're lucky the king and queen here will take me seriously, and then it will be up to them to find her and bring her in. We can all go home. We get Shawn, then we go home, Laurie said sternly. The thought of home was strong on all their minds, and even Harmon too. Even though he was a bear of the Hiatus Mountains, he still was a normal resident at the Spencers' cabin somewhere in the Brunel Forest. Captain Brennan and Harmon spoke to one another almost the entire way to the inner gate of the kingdom. Once there, Brennan had merely waved to the guards up on the wall, and moments later, the gate was lowered into the ground by what Charles could assume was a pulley system and a team of men to operate it. As they entered, it was like a city from the old days, straight out of the history books. There were people walking about enjoying the warm air. Little shops here and there with transactions of who knows what. For the most part, the kingdom looked clean, and there were 3 younger boys who were scrubbing something off, like painted letters of the walls of a nearby building, and all wearing scowls as a guard ensured the job was done accordingly. They pressed on with Brennan still upon his horse, and for the most part, everyone waved at him as they passed. To Charles it didn't look like a sign of fear, but a genuine love for the man. There was a large courtyard that came into view in between a pair of tall, thin buildings. Just up ahead, and the very castle itself was on the other side. Strangely, no one was walking through the courtyard. This, however, was answered when a guard had stopped them right before they had tried to step onto it. "Business?" asked the guard, who was wearing the typical blue and yellow leather armor with what appeared to be the sigil of the Western Kingdom on his chest, the white diamond with a tree underneath it. Brennan had dismounted and slapped the man on the shoulder. "Come now, Argatha, you don't need to be so formal. These are travelers who are tired and have need of good food, warm beds, and maybe some help from our king and queen." "Sorry, Captain. I was simply following protocol, I'm sure you can understand that." Argatha smiled at the captain and then shook his hand. "So where are you off to then, the royal wing first?" No, we have a particular stop first, and actually would you mind showing Harman here to the table?" "Not at all, sir, right this way, Harman." Argatha gestured for Harman to follow him, in which Harman was delighted to obey. They walked across the courtyard and then took a left and vanished as they walked down some stairs. "What's the table?" asked Anthony. "It's a place where the animals of the guard are allowed to eat food," answered Brennan as he patted his horse. "Trust me, it's fine food. Clobe here also eats there, and it's not at all scraps like we feed to the pigs." Laurie had chuckled. "Odd name for a horse, Clobe. How did you think of that one?" "My father was named Clobe. He too was a captain and lost his life just as I was entering the military here. When I got my promotion to captain and was assigned a fresh new horse, I wanted his name to be Clobe. So, it's like my father's with me still, every day. Might sound silly and all, I know it's not really my father's soul in the horse." Brennan stopped and turned a slight shade of pink. "It could be if you believe in reincarnation," began Anthony. "Many religions believe in the fact of their soul never going on to a place called heaven or what have you, but that your soul never dies. Instead it is repurposed." Charles was feeling awkward by Anthony's explanation. "I think my religion is a little different than that." "I appreciate what you're trying to do," said Brennan as he looked at Anthony. "Like I said, it's silly. Shall we move on then?" Brennan led the way across the courtyard, but this time they went to the right instead of heading straight for the castle. They found themselves traveling down a set of stony stairs that zigzagged to a narrow hallway that stopped at an odd-looking building, with 2 guards standing at attention before the door. The 2 men saluted Captain Brennan and allowed him and his company to pass through, and once inside there was an odd feeling that came over Charles. Where are we?" he asked. "Just here to drop something off and then we'll head to the castle," Brennan answered. They took a right turn, and on either side were doors placed every 10 feet or so for what may have been for 100 yards. The captain stopped a little past midway and then opened a door on the left and stepped in. The 3 followed, and Charles' heart stopped when he examined the room and found it completely bare. "Do you like it? This is your chamber for the remainder of your stay here in the Western Kingdom." Brennan now had his sword out and stood as if he was ready to attack them if they tried anything. "What's going on here?" Laurie asked while she moved behind Anthony and used him like a shield. Brennan circled around them and stopped when his back was to the door and the 3 of them were in the center of the room. "You're being detained, my lady. This is a cell for you and your friends. By the way, thank you for providing us with yet another Leo Mandarin painting. Those things are our top priority here, and that's the only reason that you're still alive." Charles then reached for his crossbow on his back and was about to draw it when Anthony stopped him. "Please, don't do that." Anthony gave Charles a look. Not of fear, but a strange calmness that settled Charles momentarily. "Yes, please listen to your friend there. I will, however, take that weapon from you now." Brennan walked over to Charles and harshly ripped the crossbow out of his hands. "Thank you for serving the kingdom. Please enjoy your stay here." Brennan spun around and left the room and locked it before practically skipping down the hall. "I knew it, fucking damn it," Charles cursed and sat down on the rustic stone floor. "How could you have known?" Laurie asked. Charles had taken a few deep breaths before answering her. "The cell is put together like the one in Jordan's post. Notice how quiet it is in here. It's so that the noise from within the cells can't be heard even out in the hallway. Something to do with a leaf from a certain tree, I don't remember the details." "So, what now?" Laurie asked with a wealth of anxiety beginning to bear down on her. "We wait," said Anthony calmly. "We go off and kill the captain, then we are dead no matter what. That's why I stopped you, Charles. But look, we are alive and we can figure out a way to get out of here." Charles was beyond irritated at this point and now wished that they had gone to Valinar instead. "Do you see anything in here that can help? Because I sure don't." Anthony had snapped his fingers and then pointed down at the floor. "There's a drain cover, there in the corner. It looks big enough that maybe we can open it and drop down in and see if we can use the sewers to get out of the kingdom." The three of them made it over to the drain, and indeed it appeared large enough for them to squeeze through. Anthony tried pulling it up, but nothing happened. "Can you go Hulk mode on that thing?" asked Charles. "Actually, I can." Anthony told them both to stand back, and the next moment, Anthony had his eyes closed and was standing there with his fist clenched. Another second later, he gritted his teeth, followed by a yell of what may have been pain. His body was now beginning to grow. It started with his feet and legs, then his stomach and chest, and lastly the arms and the head. It wasn't just his muscles that grew, but even his bones as well, and now he had to duck to not hit his head on the tall ceiling. "Wow, you are the Hulk!" exclaimed Laurie. "I'll make quick work of this now," Anthony replied. He grabbed the drain cover again and pulled with what looked like as much effort that it would have taken to peel off a band-aid. The lid was now resting in his hands and Anthony grinned. Laurie and Charles came over to peer inside the hole. For a moment, they thought their freedom was close at hand, but something greeted them as they peered into the darkness of the drain. A pair of arrows attached to crossbows were pointed up at them, and they could also see the glint of at least 4 sets of eyes staring back at them.